Good morning, my friends. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can be with you forever. I'm going to be leaving my email in the description, so if you want to contact me for anything at all, feel free to do so. Today, I'm going to be talking about basically like the sense of duality that a lot of people ascribe to the world in the sense of, war and peace, right? So, generally speaking, people ascribe peace as being an inherent good, war as an inherent evil. Although nowadays, depending on what circle of political belief you fall under, you might think war is good and peace is evil. Either way, it's a left versus right thing that kind of perpetuates itself often. And I see the term peace utilized in a lot of spiritual circles as being this ultimate end goal to achieve in life, even though in reality, if you think about what peace means, which is the absence of war, which if we want to define what war is, well, war is something that's combative, something that's active, something that's going out of yourself to essentially destroy or essentially, dominate, I guess. Once we get into the nuances of what those two terms actually mean, they become a lot more nuanced, and it's not necessarily in the context of war in, a literal war between countries, which has become an insatiable, indulgent, distortion of what war used to be in the past. Whereas, let's say if you go like 2,000 years ago, what a war would look like, it's nowhere near to the sheer degree of magnitude of destructive capabilities as war is today, since we have modern technology that basically exacerbates war to become, severely destructive. And this is accounted for if you look at historical accounts of, let's say, World War I or World War II, back in the day when, nowadays we consider that to be a long time ago, and it's sort of like an ancient category of what we perceive as war. But in that time, it was regarded as modern warfare, and the sheer degree of, destructive capacities that those wars were capable of was very debilitating, shocking, depressing for most people. It created significant amounts of trauma to anyone who went through those periods of war, and it has no similarities to what war was, during a time when war was considered an inherent good or an inherent thing that was honorable. If you think about the warfare of ancient warriors of Rome or the Nordic warriors, they sort of held a sort of code of conduct for themselves of, of the warrior mentality that was inherently going to war was was an honorable thing to do, so to speak. And nowadays, the context of going to war is pretty much just engaging in sheer suffering and death in such a large degree of magnitude that it's almost unforeseen in recent times. So the problem with that is this context of war has become distorted in our perceptions of what war actually means, and the same accounts for what peace actually means, right? When we think of peace as just an absence of that kind of war in the sense of people living in prosperity, it's not necessarily the case. In fact, a lot of the times the reason why ancient tribes used to go to war was because of peace in general, or peace in the sense of lack of abundance or lack of resources, and people were literally starving to death for whatever reason, and that was peace, so to speak. Peace was a lack of anything substantial, and you had to go to war in order to survive. And when we think about this in a more nuanced way, war can become synonymous with going out and hunting, even farming, to a degree, is going to war, or going to war against the land in a way. Because if you're just trying to survive and you're just existing on the earth, you have to realize, well, okay, I have to go to work, I have to go dig out these weeds, right? So if you're a farmer, you have to go to war against invasive species of plants that will try to, invade your crops, or other animals that are trying to eat your food, or bugs and other kinds of pests and disease and viruses. You're going to war against those things so you can have ample crops and food for you to be able to survive. And so this aspect of war and peace are essentially these two dichotomies of balance to have with one another. So when people say they are anti-war and we need to establish peace above everything, it becomes very problematic, because a lot of people are in a state of peace, or excessive peace, I would say, in the sense that they have no purpose in life, right? Because that's what war gives people. It gives people a purpose for something. If you're in war, even in the most extreme destitute aspect of war, let's say you're in the middle of World War II, at least there is a purpose for you. Nobody's really going to be depressed or feel like they have no reason to live during warfare, because you have to act. You have to be part of the scenario, the situation that's going on. You have to act upon what you have been trained to do. And that's sort of the aspect of war that gives people a reason to live, is to go to war, in a sense. And then once peace is established, then you have to sort of find ways to recreate war, in the sense of finding purpose in your life, because ultimately war is what drives you. And I'm talking about war in the nuanced sense, not in the destructive extremist sense of war, right? Because this is the left versus right kind of thing. You don't want to be in one versus the other and too much, otherwise you end up with suffering. And that's why we're seeing with this pro-peace over everything, we're seeing a lot of people, especially in the West, that just have no purpose in life. They have no reason to live. They live in peaceful existences, working their monotonous, busy work job, pretty much just existing from time to time, getting, all the food they need, all of the shelter they need. They work 9 to 5. They have a comfortable existence, but they have absolutely no purpose. They have no war a part of their lives. And because of that, they fall into depression. They become suicidal. They take everything that is given to them for granted. And this is sort of the toxicity of peace, so to speak, that everyone is ascribing towards. And if you want to talk about, this sense of globalized existence in the world, where we kind of live within our comfort zones and comfortable little boxes of existence. We don't have to go into the politics of the elites of, controlling the world or whatever. But essentially, we have seen a lot of people, in particular, become, sort of apathetic, cynical, nihilistic, alone most of the time. There's no sense of community. There's no sense of bringing people together, and that's specifically because we are existing in a world that's completely devoid of any war. And this is why we're seeing this reactionary response of, super right-wing fascist war above everything else, where it's like we have these internet warrior teenagers, essentially, that particularly have this overly masculine machismo mentality of war as being this inherent virtue to ascribe towards, which also is obviously not a good thing, especially in today's world where we have so much technological power, so much destructive power and the capacity for war. But we see people acting out in this way because they have become essentially, what's the word I'm looking for? They've been coddled in a way where in this world of peace, so to speak, that they have no purpose anymore, and this is a consequence of living in a world where everything is sort of organized and geared towards peace above all other things, is that you find people have no purpose anymore. And this accounts for both capitalism or communist societies, where you're essentially given very few opportunities or choices, and you work in a very boring job, and you make secure salary rather, and that's pretty much your existence. You live in a very peaceful existence in that way. You go to your shitty job every day and go back to your mediocre apartment, eat your mediocre food, have no purpose, no ability to, develop yourself or push forward in something, and you have no connection with other people, because that's also the other thing about war. Even in World War II, when you have soldiers going to war with each other, that is where you establish the strongest bonds, is through warfare, right? We see a lot of communities becoming very intertwined. You become very familial, nationalistic, whatever you want to ascribe it to. But when there's this aspect of war, this aspect of struggle towards achieving something, whether that's through a literal war or just literally trying to find a way to make something in the world for yourself, not just having a job, because that's not the same thing. When you have a vision towards creating something and you need to do it with other people, there is this drive, there is this war going on that you're all fighting towards. And then you have peace that's balancing that, in the sense where you're not completely destroying yourself, you're not going through these severely traumatic experiences of suffering and human tragedy. It's not an extremist aspect of war. It's this balanced, driven sense where you can sort of work towards something, build something that's real and concrete, while also having stability, having peace in the sense of comfort and seclusion, and being able to rest properly, right? This is that dichotomy. You want both of those things in the world. So when people say they're anti-war and pro-peace above everything else, I find it's a problematic viewpoint, even though they might not intentionally mean those things, but the words themselves and the ascribing towards anti-war in general recreates that kind of narrative. And it's why you have a lot of suffering in the world, a lot of suffering through the aspect of peace that sort of perpetuates itself, with so many people living these horrible, very just boring lives, essentially. You're living in a very languished existence where nothing's really happening. You think about during the pandemic, everyone's just sitting at home, working from home, doing absolutely nothing with their lives, and just sort of languishing and waiting for it to be over so they can actually go out and do something, which is that war aspect. We need a little bit of war in our lives in order to actually find meaning in something. We need to go and accomplish something, or you need to go to war in some aspects, and that's not a literal war, that's a metaphysical one. And in the spiritual aspects, like let's look at Buddhism, which everyone kind of ascribes the superficial notion of, peace and serenity above everything else. But in reality, if you're a Buddhist monk, or if you're a Christian monk, or if you're any kind of religious person, you realize that it's very much rooted in the sense of war. You're going to war with your own conscience, you're going to war with your own self, you're going to war with other demons, you're going to war with other belief systems. And even though you might be adhered to a very spiritual and peaceful countenance in yourself, you still have to engage in that purpose, that drive towards war. And then also as well, that goes into the extremes sometimes, where you have these religious wars that happen that serve no end except for just killing people and murdering people for sake of your beliefs. That's obviously the extreme side. Then you have the other extreme, which I would say probably is more ascribing towards New Age thought, where everything's just happy and joyful and everything's, lovey-dovey, and if you don't ascribe to that, then you're evil. And they essentially go to war against anybody who goes to war, which is kind of an ironic thing. But either way, there is that notion of peace above everything else, and you notice within these spiritual groups of New Ageness where there's no war or there's an anti-war sentiment, they don't actually make any spiritual progress whatsoever, because they don't go through the warfare. They don't go through the spiritual challenges and the turbulence that is necessary to ascend yourself spiritually. So that's pretty much all I really wanted to bring up on that. I'm going to try to do more videos. I've kind of been neglecting of my YouTube channel, but I would like to return more and make more content in the future. And if you have suggestions of what you might want me to talk about or discuss, feel free to comment, and I can touch upon it in a future episode. All right, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Peace.